we have Joe Stubbs from TAC, who's going to join us and give us a brief walkthrough some of the work you did to integrate with the Tapas API.
Cool. Okay. Thanks. So Tapas is a 5-year project, NSF-funded project. It's a cloud-based computing framework to support computational research, really at the highest level. There are a bunch of different APIs, but the main things people do with Tapas, are they manage data and they execute software. They do analyses on high-performance computing traditionally, but also cloud high-throughput computing. And we're an agentless system, mostly SSH-based. We have support for a few other communication protocols, but we run in the cloud in data centers like here at TAC, a few other data centers, and we reach out, we communicate with the systems that users have registered with us sort of in real time. So our higher level objectives are things like, programmable access to all of this advanced cyber infrastructure, right? Automating the analyses on these cloud and high throughput and high performance computing systems. Being able to reproduce the analysis that you're doing, right? So Tapas records the activities that are taking place in its platform, and it helps you to rerun the same things again, and therefore reproduce your results. And also collaboration, right? Collaborating with individuals, but also disseminating your work to entire communities, if that's the place where you are, through our sort of fine-grained permissions model. So, in this way, it kind of shares a lot of the goals that Globus has. But, obviously each project has, kind of its own distinct approaches to what they do and how they do it. So we do have a lot of folks using Tapas. We, kind of historically, we've had a lot of, these so-called science gateways projects. These are kind of, big web portals with a graphical interface. But we have, various institutions who have actually deployed Tapas components, and we have a number of labs and projects and institutes that we're collaborating with. And, this is just kind of, like a snapshot of, a handful of the different science gateway projects that are being built on top of Tapas or were built on top of Tapas. And it really is kind of, a broad range of scientific and engineering domains and disciplines that are using it. So we really are kind of like a domain agnostic in much the same way that Globus is. So I mentioned that we have a bunch of APIs, and I'm not going to go through all of them. Obviously, don't have time to do that. We do have our own tenancy and authentication and security layer, but I'm going to focus just mostly on the, what people would mostly think of as the core Tapas APIs, and that's the data management and code execution APIs, because this is exactly where the Globus integration really is happening. It's really where it's fitting in. So the idea with these APIs, right, is that this is where you firstly register the resources, the storage and computing resources that you're going to have Tapas interact with on your behalf. Okay, and that's the system's API. So we have storage systems, we have compute systems, we have different types of systems. And when you're registering these things, the system type is one of the attributes that you're going to provide to Tapas. And I'll say, I'm mentioning that specifically because it ties directly into the Globus integration. Once you've registered systems, though, you can then use the Files API to manage data on that system through Tapas. So you can ingest, you can upload, you can download, and then you can also transfer between two systems. And so then the apps API is where you register the codes, the analyses that are going to run. And the jobs are the actual instantiations or the invocations of the apps on the systems. And the jobs service really pulls everything together because each job runs through an entire life cycle where Tapas will both stage input files from different systems onto the execution system where the job, where the workload is going to run. And it will also archive data, results, outputs that were created by the application back off of, the execution system, typically, some kind of scratch file system onto some, archival storage. So that's kind of a whirlwind kind of crash course backdrop to the Globus integration work that we've been doing. And yeah, and so I just wanted to kind of get started by saying a little bit about the motivation. So obviously Globus is, supports a massive community of researchers, 20,000 or more Globus endpoints, over 200,000 users. And obviously, it provides, a lot of features and functionality, but a very reliable and high performance transfer functionality. And a lot of different, support for a lot of different protocols and, via these things they call connectors, right? So, cloud APIs, archival tape systems, even, a lot of different protocols that, that we don't support today in Tapas. So that's one thing, right? But I mean, kind of almost more fundamentally, is the fact that a lot of Tapas users are Globus users, right? They've been using Globus for years, and they want to continue to use Globus for all of those reasons, right? And but there's a problem, right? There's a problem when Globus users try to also use Tapas, because they have to basically, at this point, do the Globus portion completely out of band from the Tapas portion. And so this breaks things, right? I mean, they can get stuff to run, they can get it to work, but it breaks some of the goals, some of the primary features that we're going for with Tapas, like the data provenance track, the job history that Tapas is collecting, right? We can't stage data through Tapas as part of a job, as part of the actual job record in Tapas. So they do it around, on the side with Globus, and that's suboptimal. So the design that we've done, and Rashida gave this is a really great setup, because we're going to be using the Globus OAuth flows, so we're going to be walking flows. So basically, there's a new Tapas system type, a new protocol type Globus, right? So this is alongside our existing types, like Linux or S3 or iRods. You can now register a system of type Globus, or you will be able to once the integration is done. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you to basically walk a Globus OAuth flow via Tapas. And at the end, I didn't put in the slides, like all the details. This is the native app authorization code flow that we saw just previously. But at the end of the day, essentially what's going to happen is Tapas is going to obtain and manage an access and a refresh token for that user, for that Globus endpoint. And then we have another component, which we're calling the Tapas Globus proxy. This is just like a lightweight service. It's actually stateless. It's a completely stateless service, written in Python, so that it can leverage the Globus Python SDK. But basically what it does in a nutshell is it translates API calls that are coming into the Tapas transfer service into Globus calls, right? So then we'll modify, the last piece is that we'll modify the Tapas data transfer agent to utilize that proxy. So in other words, instead of the Tapas transfer agent, going directly to the resource via SSH or via the S3 protocol or the iRods protocol, it will proxy that through the Globus transfer mechanism. And yeah, I think I still have a couple minutes, maybe, hopefully, to talk about a little bit of the future work. So that is all planned work, scoped. It's going to happen. But we also have, some ideas for kind of a longer term collaboration with the Globus team. And so it's around this idea of OAuth for SSH, right? So today what Tapas does, and I think what Globus does to some extent at least, is we use SSH credentials. These are long-term credentials, right? To go and contact the system directly as the user, for instance, to submit a Slurm job. And the idea at a high level with OAuth for SSH is that instead of having this one kind of long-term credential, we would have short-lived tokens instead, right? So we would walk an OAuth flow to get a token that we could use to actually SSH. And we could take advantage of the scopes associated with that token to potentially limit what can happen there. But there's been a lot of work in the Cy tokens project and other projects on standardizing that. But essentially the idea is that we could both benefit from this project, right? We could both utilize this in collaboration with the tax security team and the HPC group to kind of review what we're proposing and make sure that we can deploy it at TAC. So we would support some work that I think Globus would potentially be interested in doing themselves would be to support JWT as a spec in Globus Auth for those OAuth SSH tokens. That has a couple of benefits we're interested in, like being able to validate the token without an extra API call. So the token is self-validating, right? In some extent, if you have the public key, and also being able to modify the OAuth SSH plugin, right? The thing that's actually running on the SSH daemon, to allow sort of various policies to be configurable, right? So sort of JWT lifetimes, multi-factor authentication requirements, restricting which identity domains you're accepting, because, and potentially even having some kind of identity mapping functionality in there, and so forth. So yeah, I think I'm probably over a little bit time. I'm sorry about that. Through some links up here, and I'll happy to make the slides available. So thank you very much. I appreciate being here. That's all I've got.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Does anyone have questions for Joe? Anything online, Bridget? Okay. Did you want to talk about SSH quick? Yeah.
So thank you, Joe. That was really good. So one thing I want to comment on was the OAuth SSH work. So this is something that we started I think sometime last year. There's an open source repo with a PAM module plugin to OAuth SSH that can consume an OAuth token and map that just like we do with GCS, right? And you're able to authenticate, come in, and rather than SSH keys, use that. So we made that available, and we have also been working with Exceed and the Open On Demand team to integrate using the OAuth SSH technology as a way that Open On Demand interacts rather than using SSH keys. So that's one effort that's going on. And then we're super happy to be partnering with TAC on this, sort of get a facility perspective on what it is to run an SSH server with the PAM module like that, right? And we just added MFA support, much like we do for our high assurance endpoint collections. So we have that as well. And the ideas that Joe put out there in terms of identity domain restrictions. So if you look at it, the policies look a lot like what you would see in a map collection, right? Like what domain are you logging in from, authentication, how often do you have to authenticate, MFA, and so on. So we're really excited to partner with TAC on both sort of that full automation that they're working on in proxy, but also get a facility looking at what it would take to run an OAuth server like that in production, right? Sort of an SSH server like that in production.
Okay, well, we are back on track. So we have lunch for an hour, I think. Is it till 1:15? Let me just check. Yeah, so we're back here at 1:15. We'll have Claire from Nessie give us a perspective from the Southern Hemisphere, and then we'll have the tutorial on automation. So see you in an hour.